Before briefly highlighting Senator Rubio's basic biographical information, I just want to take note of what for me, and I know for many of you as well, is the part of Senator Rubio's biography that is more important than where he went to school or even his first elected position, whether that was president of the student body or president or to the U.S. Senate. And I'm referring, of course, to Senator Rubio's personal story. His faith in America's promise was shaped early on by his parents, who left Cuba in 1956 after Fidel Castro solidified his communist grip, were never able to return. In America, Senator Rubio's father worked mostly as a bartender, while his mother worked in different jobs through the years as a maid, cashier, and retail clerk. Senator Rubio was born in Miami and spent his early years there, moved to Las Vegas, and then returned to Miami, where he lives today with his wife, Jeanette, and his 4 children. And Senator Rubio, at least speaking for myself, I want to thank you for the work that you do on issues like immigration reform and others, in addition to the ones that we're talking about today. Now, on the basic bio-essentials, Senator Rubio was elected to the Senate in 2010. He was elected to the Florida House of Representatives in 1999, served in the House until 2008. He became Majority Leader in 2003 and then Speaker of the House 3 years later. You can see he's a quick riser. Senator Rubio's committee in the U.S. Senate that's of a special interest to us, of course, is that he serves on the subcommittee on Communications Technology and Internet of the Senate Commerce Committee. Now, I know when I asked you to deliver this address, I told your staff that you could talk about anything that you wanted to talk about. But now that I've focused on the fact, really, that your law degree is from the University of Miami, I'm going to have to insist, since I'm a loyal double Dookie, a double Duke graduate, that you not refer to the thrashing that Miami gave to Duke back in January. But other than that, you're free to talk about anything that you want. So with that, again, welcome, and we're very glad you're here.
First, I appreciate that. Even though I did go to the University of Miami School of Law, UF is the team I root for. That was my undergrad, and we haven't beat Duke yet, I don't think, this year, so I have nothing to worry about. And but thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I'm sorry I'm a few minutes late. I was busy unlocking my cell phone, which is apparently illegal now. I'm joking, for those of you that are recording. I want to get some visit from the Librarian of Congress or something. Anyway, thank you for this opportunity. I'm really grateful, Randy. Thank you for having me here today, and thanks for that introduction and for inviting me to speak in front of all of you. I've been looking forward to this opportunity, and I'm pleased to be joining all of you today. Let me start by acknowledging this foundation and the work that it does. It's great to have groups like this that promote free markets and individual freedom, and thank you for upholding these principles and for providing a much-needed voice in the telecommunications policies. What I want to do is I want to spend a few minutes discussing some of the ways I think we can help in the digital transformation and the 2 issues that I think are critical to this effort and that I hopefully will be able to work on with you moving forward. Now, as you all know, the theme of your conference, right, is completing the transition to a digital world, how to finish the job and why it matters. And completing that transition to a digital world is, as a phrase, it sounds great, and I think everybody here would be on board with that. But why does it matter? We have to explain to people why does it matter. It not just matters to you in this room or to those of us who care about technology, but why does it matter to people out there, to the entrepreneur, to the consumer, the people who want better job opportunities in the 21st century economy, who want a better chance to succeed in America's thriving middle class? Well, it matters because the future of telecommunications and the services that the middle class are going to use is going digital. And the future is an internet protocol-based world. So as we as policymakers, we have to put the right policies in place for broadband networks, for wireless internet, for global internet ecosystems to ensure that legacy laws and regulations don't deprive the middle class of the opportunities that will come along with the digital world. Now, how do we do this? Is it with more government and more regulation? Or do we do this with a light touch regulatory structure that is based on sound analysis, is based on competition, it's based on economic growth? And do we break down the regulatory barriers and rewrite or reform and rewrite laws based on the past? Or do we continue to subject 21st century industries to 19th and 20th century laws? These are the important questions that we're facing. These are the fundamental questions at the core of what we're talking about when it comes to the technology revolution of the 21st century. And to answer them, to answer these questions, we have to fully embrace what it means to be in a digital world. And if we get them wrong, then the benefits of this new world, the benefits of globalism, the benefits of the information technology revolution, the benefits of a digital world will not be fully realized for all Americans. And in fact, with negative consequences that are going to impact on how we're going to be able to communicate with our loved ones and our colleagues, with prospective employers or customers, and with other nations, and also towards advancing worthy causes. So over the past few months, I've talked a lot about economic growth and prosperity. In fact, I just gave a speech on the floor of the Senate where I argued that really the whole debate about the budget is not so much about government spending as it is about what government should be doing to create an environment that allows economic growth to happen. And in achieving these goals, what's important when it comes to economic growth in particular is how we help these goals to be achieved for people that are trying to make it into the middle class or achieve greater opportunities within it. And the reason why I talk so much about the middle class is, in addition to being a product of it, it's what makes us exceptional as a country. It's what makes us different. Every country has rich people. Unfortunately, every country's had poor people. But what helps us stand apart from the rest of the world is a vibrant middle class and a strong working class that's working to get to the middle class. And any event you go to, many of you are in the middle class, the folks that are working here today, serving the food and coffee, these are all people that are working hard to create a better life for themselves and their families. The promise of America is that if they do that, one day they'll be able to have and do more. And that sets us apart from the rest of the world. That's why I focus on it so much. And what's the role of telecommunications in that? There's no question that telecommunications is going to be vital to our future economic growth and to the upward mobility of millions of Americans. It probably doesn't get as much coverage as tax policy and regulatory policy and energy policy, but I would argue that in many ways, especially in the 21st century, it is just as important. Because what we're talking about are industries and subsets of our economy that didn't even exist 20 years ago, or even 5 years ago. The perfect example is the app economy, the applications economy. 5 years ago, there were no apps. There weren't any. This year, the global app economy will reach $25 billion, and it's projected to grow at an average annual rate of over 40%. And that's crazy. And I'll tell you a personal app story. I recently, we're in Lent for those who are Roman Catholics, and I went to Mass, and there's a confession app. You can't confess to the app. The point is, I wish, yeah. But the point, it has everything in there that you need. It's pretty amazing, and the priest thought I was crazy. But anyway, the point is that there's a confession app if you're interested. And it's not mine. I didn't create it. Anyway, so what that means in the real world, what it means in the real world is the next time you go to Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts or Panera or wherever it is trendy these days, that means the guy or girl that you see there, that you see them typing away at their little laptop computer or likely or increasingly on their tablet, they might be an app developer working on a new app. And when they break through, you're not going to see them at Starbucks anymore because they're growing. They'll have opened up an office. They'll have hired new people. This, by the way, happens to be the cycle of prosperity. The cycle I've just described to you happens to be the way middle class and working class prosperity is created. That is, someone with an idea has the opportunity to take that idea and turn it into a business, and as a result, create jobs for other people and prosperity for all of them. That is how prosperity is created. And what technology is doing, it is lowering the barrier to entry. It is lowering the barrier to entry. You used to, in order to go to business in the past, you had to have a big office with all kinds of fax machines and telephones and computers and all sorts of things. Today, because of technology, you don't need as much anymore, especially in certain industries. And so the way to view telecommunications and technology is as something that is removing barriers to creating opportunities through the cycle that I've just described. Now, going back to the app example, people who couldn't possibly have taken a college course on something called app development because apps didn't exist are now employed by this whole new sector. And that's right, that right there is the essence of our economy as I described. Now, it goes without saying, I think that future upward growth depends on telecommunications as a driving force in the way that I've just described. But not only as a thriving sector, but also as a way for individuals to improve their own economic well-being. Now, for those of us who serve in government and for everyone in this room, one of the fundamental challenges before us is to find an appropriate, sustainable, and limited role for government in creating the right conditions for entrepreneurs in these industries and the industries that are yet to be created, and for their customers to take advantages of the opportunities that these technologies provide. So how do we do that? Well, I believe it has to start with a regulatory agency that works and laws that are based on where the industry is headed, not where it used to be. Now, when I first got on the Commerce Committee and did some background meetings on telecommunication issues that I didn't know a lot about other than as a consumer, I was struck by how many of our laws, how many of our regulations, how many of our structures do not match the nature of the industry that they are supposed to oversee. We have this fast-paced, dynamic industry that's operating in a global, hyper-competitive environment. And we have these governmental agencies that have static laws and legacy regulations that were applied to analog networks in the 20th century in a more monopolistic environment. And they are now being applied to technologies that are operating in a converged marketplace. That means we are applying literally 20th century laws to 21st century businesses that are moving faster and developing quicker than any businesses have ever developed. And government just can't keep pace with that. So I think about the way my family utilizes telecommunications. You know, you can surf the internet on our TV. We can watch TV and stream movies on our iPad or our Apple TV or whatever you, and I guess what's the new one I'm using? Samsung has this thing you can go right to Netflix, I guess. We can use our cell phones to do all of that, and occasionally you can use your cell phone to make a call if people still do that anymore. And perhaps the most important technological development of recent memory, the NFL Sunday Ticket, which has made life easier for a lot of people. The point is, that's our house. That's our house. And that's just an example of how broadband has allowed for the integration of voice and video and data capabilities, all at high levels of service, and to the cross-platform competition we see among other service providers. This is the reality of a converged world in a real-world example. Yet the Telecommunications Act divides the marketplace into silos, as if these services operate independently of each other. And that makes no sense, and that's only going to lead to confusion as technology and services continue to evolve. So what we need are laws with flexibility that do not subject providers who offer the same service to different regulations based on what they're used to offer, on what they used to offer, or how that service is delivered to the home. Legacy regulations, for example, written in 1996, could not have contemplated the multifaceted IP world we have today. And don't get me wrong, I love my Windows 96 on my giant desktop computer and the big Motorola phones that Crockett and Tubbs used on Miami Vice. But we've moved way beyond that a long time ago. And it's time for Congress to start moving beyond that 96 Act. For telecommunications, a law based on the past, that's only going to hurt our future. We also have to look at reforming the Commission in order to have more of a predictable and transparent regulatory policy. That should be the case for every agency, by the way, but especially the FCC. And there's a number of ways to improve the FCC and ensure that we have an agency that mirrors the industry it regulates. Things that should have bipartisan support, like demonstrating the necessity and benefits of the regulations, or restricting conditions that can be put on acquisitions and spectrum auctions, requiring the agency to set and follow timelines and deadlines for its proceedings, or reforming the forbearance authority so it's more difficult for the FCC to reject regulatory relief petitions when they are justified. Now, we've all heard stories of applications sitting on the Commission for years and rulemaking proceedings remaining open with no deadline or decisions in sight. How does that create certainty? How does that create certainty for someone who's trying to make a business decision? How does not acting on an application or appeal give businesses the confidence to make the kind of decisions that we want them to make here in this country? The best example is the Title II docket. A proceeding to regulate broadband services under common carrier regulations. It's a massive change to how the internet would be regulated and how the industry would operate. Remains open for 3 years, just sitting there like a threat. Just sitting there like a threat, or path the internet regulation if the current effort fails. This is not certainty. It's not the type of regulatory framework that incentivizes the type of investment or promotes the kind of innovation that we desperately want and need to be happening here, in this economy, in this century. And it's not how you further the digital transition. And it's certainly not how you grow your economy. Needless regulation and regulatory uncertainty are literally job killers. And they're job killers throughout the entire economy, but this is especially true in telecommunications. And that brings me to the 2 issues that I plan to focus on over the next couple of years, and that are the crux of the debate, by the way, and the future of the digital transition. The first is the regulation and governance of the internet. And it's almost an understatement to say that the internet has changed the world. You hear people say that all the time, but it truly has. It's impacted everything we do, and it's connected people and ideas in ways that were not previously imagined. It has virtually unlimited power to help people achieve unprecedented freedom and to rise above the circumstances of their birth. And anyone who doubts that should look to the Middle East. The Arab Spring is a creation of internet access. Not the ability to feed people content, but the ability to give people the freedom to access any content they want. Just yesterday, I met with a brave blogger, Yoani Sanchez from Cuba, one of the few people in Cuba that has her own webpage and accesses Twitter and uses that to denounce the human rights violations and the oppressive conditions that exist with Cuba. Her number 1 agenda, number 2 agenda, and number 3 agenda items were figuring out ways to give people of Cuba more access to the internet. I've said that totalitarianism, violations of human rights, they cannot withstand a true and free open internet. You cannot lie to your people if your people have access to the world. And nothing has given people access to the world more than the internet. It is truly a global changing experience. And you are seeing it play out in places. There is a reason why China restricts the internet. There is a reason why Iran restricts access to the internet. There is a reason for that. Just in the cause of human freedom, what the internet has done has truly been as dramatic as any advancement in modern human history. Now, you can look at Intel's study on internet activity to see how much people are doing online around the world. The study found this, that in 1 minute, more than 204 million emails are sent, 47,000 apps are downloaded, 20 million photos and 6 million Facebook pages are viewed, and 1.3 million video clips are watched on YouTube. And that's just the Harlem Shake. Glad you know what that is. I used that speech at the last Republican conference. Nobody laughed. They know what I'm Anyway, all this happens in just 1 minute, okay? Now think about the amount of economic activity in that 1 minute. To ensure that the internet's success continues and that society continues to benefit, we must keep it free from regulation, both at home and abroad. Now, much of the debate surrounding net neutrality or even the adoption of the FCC's order happened before I came to the Senate. But it didn't take long after I arrived in the Senate for me to realize that I didn't agree with the FCC's action. It was clear that this was a regulation based on speculation, implementing mandates that constitute public utility-style regulation onto broadband networks. That was clearly a step in the wrong direction. So I hope that net neutrality mandates are overturned in court. And if that occurs, we must be prepared to oppose efforts by proponents of net neutrality to reclassify broadband and pass legislation that does so. But we also have to prepare for the growing international threat to the internet. I alluded to that a moment ago. A year ago, some questioned whether there was really a threat to internet freedom, or if the ITU was actually seeking to regulate the internet. But after Dubai, I don't think we have to answer that question anymore. We don't have to wonder about the intent of some countries to oppose internet freedom. And we see, of course, stories all the time of countries that are censoring and controlling the internet. I told you the story of Cuba a moment ago. And for example, 2 weeks ago, Iran banned a majority of the country's virtual private networks. In December, China passed a new law that ties every website and internet connection user account to the identity of an individual. These aren't just efforts to stifle political conversation or restrict their flow of information, by the way. These are efforts to oppress people. These are efforts to deny people their fundamental human rights to express themselves, to organize themselves peacefully, and to use the internet to learn, and to learn about the world around them and the reality of the world outside of where they live. If we've learned anything about the internet over the last few years, it's its enormous power to give people economic opportunity. When people are able to connect and use the internet, they don't just have to be pen pals with people. They can use it to explore business opportunities. The more open and accessible the internet is around the world, the more prosperous people will be. And that means greater opportunities for Americans, for American small business, for American companies to sell their products and services abroad. At a time when we have this rising middle class, the opportunity all over the world, the opportunity to sell the things we invent to people all over the world. So as I said earlier, it's no surprise that these countries like Iran, China, and Cuba, that these are among those that supported international control over the internet. But the issue is not just censorship. We also have to be concerned that countries want to justify economic regulation of the internet, and that the ITU even wants to bring the internet under its jurisdiction. That alone should concern us. The United States has to take these developments seriously, and we have to work to prevent intergovernmental control and influence over the internet. To do so, we have to do what we've done in the past. We have to engage our allies and work with countries in preparation for future meetings and conferences. Now, I'm not saying that the internet should operate outside the law. illegal activity, even if carried out through digital means, is illegal activity. What I'm saying is that we must protect the internet ecosystem, the content, the architecture, the networks, from government control and from regulation, especially from international tribunals. And that's why I work with senators from both sides of the aisle, as well as members of the House last year to make Congress's position on this absolutely crystal clear, and why I'm working again on bipartisan legislation that reinforces that the policy of the United States, the official policy of the United States, is to promote a global internet free from government control and maintain the current multi-stakeholder governance system that's in place. We just can't stand idly by as countries try to justify censorship or economic regulation of the internet. Because if we do, we are going to lose the very essence of what makes the internet unique and great, and it's going to jeopardize the promise the internet holds for the digital transition. Another issue critical to the digital transition is spectrum. The way I've described this issue, and I made this point last week in the committee, so we talk about how important roads are to the economy. And if you've tried to get here in the morning or leave in the afternoon from Washington, D.C., you know how important roads are, and inadequate roads, the impact they can have on an economy. They impact the ability to get your product to the marketplace, for example, in commerce. Well, that's the way I see spectrum. And as they're the roads of the digital age. And we know right now that the roads are getting crowded and the traffic is only going to get worse. It's not just about inconvenience. It's not just about taking a few seconds longer to view a web page or send an email. This is a real inconvenience that has a real dramatic impact on our economy and on its ability to grow if the demand outstrips the supply of spectrum available to the private marketplace. Now, Cisco's latest report on internet traffic found that globally, mobile data traffic grew 70% last year, and it's expected to grow 13-fold by 2017. This year, the number of mobile connected devices will exceed the world's population. Think about what I just said, the number of mobile connected devices, there are going to be more mobile connected devices in the world than people. We already have more in this country. We have more of these devices than people in the country right now. But we don't need stats to tell this story. Everyone in here is using a wireless device, some right now, and hopefully tweeting about how great the speech is. But anyway, we're banking and we're controlling our appliances from our devices. How many of you have deposited a check from your cell phone by taking a picture of it? I haven't. Okay, well, I haven't. I'm afraid of the Chinese hackers. But anyway, I haven't. But the point is, people are doing that all the time. Utility companies are deploying wireless meters. Even restaurants are using tablets to show you the menu. And I found the more expensive they are, the more they want to use this tablet to show it to you, but because they can change the prices electronically. Simply put, look, the world is going wireless. The world's going wireless. Just as a personal aside, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I used to sit in front of I literally virtually never sit in front of my computer anymore. It's all an iPad or the phone, and it's constant flow of information. The bottom line is, if we don't even know what the world's going to look like in 5 years, not to mention 10 years. Put yourself in a time machine and go back a decade ago. I just did that a moment ago when he said he was majority leader in 2003 in the Florida legislature. 10 years ago, if I would have seen one of you guys walk in with an iPad or a Samsung or whatever, I would have had no idea. I would have wondered, why is that guy walking around with a TV in his hand, a flat screen? I wouldn't know what it was. That's how fast the world is changing. I used to joke that years ago, if you told someone you were going to Google them, they'd slap you, right? They'd be offended. If you told someone you just tweeted, they'd say, keep that to yourself. The point is, that's how fast the world is changing. We have no idea what the world's going to look like 5 years ago, except one thing: it's going to be very, very different. And with the development of cloud computing, M2M communications, open source platforms, the industry is going to continue to change at a rapid pace. There's no doubt about that. And competition between traditional carriers and web-based companies is only going to continue while consumers are going to demand greater bandwidth and higher download speeds. This is the great part about wireless telecommunications. This is the future of the industry. We don't know what's down the road in terms of new technology or innovative devices, but we do know that in order for these new technologies and innovations to be realized, in order for more Americans to participate in the wireless economy, in order for this to happen, we are going to have to make more spectrum available. And the reason why we have to do this is not because carriers want more spectrum. We have to do this for our economy. Estimates are that for every 500 megahertz of spectrum made available for commercial use, that's an additional 350,000 jobs created and $166 billion for our gross domestic product. We have to do this for economic mobility. Wireless, by the way, is the preferred route to the internet for minority populations. For Hispanics, for African Americans, wireless adoption outpaced that of the general population. The path to economic prosperity for minority populations in this country is in large part wireless as well. We have to do it because it will help empower our people with education and skills to make it into the middle class. One of the most revolutionary movements that are occurring right now in this country in education is with innovative online courses that are in some cases free. Not everyone can afford a four-year university or college route. And as part of our educational reforms, we need to take advantage of these new creative ways that people can educate themselves with little more than a wireless connection. And making this reality will require making more spectrum available. So you see, for people who don't think the spectrum issue matters to them, education is a perfect example of how important it really is to our goal of helping more people get the education they need for the middle-class jobs of the 21st century. We're also going to have to make more spectrum available to our kids and teenagers because the wireless world is the only world they know. The latest survey from Pew Internet and American Life Project found that 1/4 of teens access the internet mostly from their cell phones. My kids are going to look at wires the way I look at rotary phones. And the reason for allocating more spectrum, I think, is pretty clear. But as all of you know, the solutions are not. And that's why I want to get more involved in this issue, because there's no silver bullet to solving our spectrum issues, but there are a number of steps we can help take. Now, I believe we have to get more spectrum in the pipeline. We need to look beyond the auctions currently authorized and have a series of auctions over several years to provide spectrum in a clear and predictable and steady manner. This is how we provide industry certainty, so that they are incentivized to invest and deploy the infrastructure. And to ensure that happens is going to require getting the incentive auctions, and those set for 2015, getting those done on time. It will also require reallocating government spectrum. Now, we all know the challenges that go along with reallocation. There's no doubt that the federal government, including our military, needs spectrum too, but our warfighters, our satellite communications, our operations in space, they're all examples of the importance of spectrum to government. No one would deny that. But spectrum is a limited public asset. Therefore, we have to make sure that it's being put to the best and most valuable use for our taxpayers. And we must be certain that it's being used efficiently and it's being used for justifiable purposes. Just because an agency utilizes a particular band of spectrum now does not mean that it should always, or that it cannot operate somewhere else on the spectrum frequency. We need to know how agencies are utilizing their full spectrum. And I'm pleased to see that the government's sitting down with industry stakeholders to share information about this. They're conducting tests and they're learning about each other's spectrum needs. This is the type of collaboration that has to happen more in the future. To ensure that we capitalize on these collaborations and reallocate spectrum in the future, I think we need several things to occur. We need a full accounting of how agencies are utilizing spectrum and accurate estimates of what will be required to clear spectrum. We need the NTIA and the OMB to hold agencies accountable to ensure that spectrum is being used efficiently by them. We need the wireless industry to be willing partners when working with NTIA and the other agencies. We need leadership from the White House, from the FCC, from NTIA, from Congress, to ensure that spectrum reallocation is a priority moving forward. And we need to be forward-thinking. And by that I mean pairing spectrum bands to maximum proceeds and the use of that spectrum and making spectrum available that is internationally harmonized. That's why I'm pleased to see that the action taken by the FCC yesterday in notifying NTIA of its intent to auction 40 megahertz of spectrum to preserve potential pairings. This is exactly what Commissioner Pai was advocating for at last week's hearing. And I think by forward thinking, I also mean sharing and utilizing unlicensed spectrum as well, especially where it makes sense. And that's why I'm encouraged that the FCC is doing what they're doing with unlicensed spectrum for above 55 gigahertz. Now, hopefully this is going to continue to promote the use of Wi-Fi, which will help offload wireless traffic, and it will lead to more broadband hotspots like we're seeing deployed by the cable industry. As I stated before, there's not one answer, so we have to explore all these options. The situation is simple. The federal government has an asset, and all of which is not being used efficiently. And that's not a surprise, but it's unfortunate. The government, by the way, also needs money to close our deficit and pay down the debt. And we have private entities that are willing to pay a lot for these limited assets, which will help agencies upgrade their equipment, will help them use spectrum more efficiently, proceeds which could help pay down the debt, and it all helps grow our economy, which will also help us pay down the debt. Now, you can clearly see how, by our hearing last week, that there's a lot of interest in this issue, and that's a good thing, and it makes sense why. Because we have a sector of the telecommunication industry that has been extremely successful, that's provided devices and technologies that has changed our lives and that will be a vital contributor to our economic future. But the industry's lifeblood, which is spectrum, could be limited. And that's why we have to ensure that it isn't. Otherwise, we are going to endanger the industry's future, and we're going to set back the digital transition. Now, what I've hoped to do here today is lay out a few of my priorities and ways that I think we can further this transition, but we have to start with the agencies and the laws that govern the space. The transition is going to be inhibited unless we have a commission and unless we have laws that work. And more than anything else, at least I believe that the future of the digital transition can be secured if we keep the internet free from regulation and intergovernmental control, and if we can get more spectrum into the commercial marketplace. So I'll close with this. The focus today is the digital transition and how we can finish the job. And I would caution against looking only at finishing the job. Sure, it's important that we do, but we have to look at the steps to get there. Otherwise, we may end up picking the wrong ones. But we should not limit ourselves to focusing on the finish line, because we don't know what the line will be or what it will look like. Telecommunications is moving that fast. That's why we have to be forward-thinking, and we have to take the long-term view on all these issues. And I believe that if we do that, that's how we can ensure that telecommunications continues to lead our economic growth and opportunity and provides for millions of Americans a path to the middle class and beyond, and a better life for all of our people and for people all over the world. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. Thank you.
Senator Rubio, this morning I said to the crowd here that I knew that you were going to give a substantive speech. You know, you're never really sure of anything, but wow, you really gave us a tremendously thoughtful, comprehensive, and I think fundamentally important address, and I want to thank you for that. Another thing I said this morning was that you referred to the wireless devices, that it would be okay for people to tweet. I didn't say it had to be favorable tweets, but there couldn't be any watching of the basketball games this afternoon, which are probably now on. So what I really want to say to you in thanking you is that I'm really glad that in addition to all the other important issues that you're tackling, and we know what those are and they're important, but I really am pleased that you're also focusing on telecommunications as you've shown us today, because as you've explained, that's very important too, and I'm really grateful for that. And what I want to do is just ask whether, with that, are you able to take just one or two questions, and
I think so. Yeah, I have a few.
Okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it quickly then. These people know that I can be quick. And so I'll give Commissioner McDowell the first question, and these are no subparts, just two quick questions. We have some mics here. You just...
Okay. Winner. Is it on? First of all, Senator Rubio, thank you.
Universal, right?
Yeah, I know. So this is my overseer here. But as I told you at the beginning, unfortunately, I'll be stepping down in a few weeks after 7 years. My first vote, by the way, in June of '06, I may have told you a couple years ago, was very first vote was a freedom vote to change the channel for Televisión Martí to transmit on a different channel and at higher power into Cuba to give the people there hope and dreams of freedom, which hopefully will come to.
Soap operas.
And some telenovelas también, that's right. But it does speak to actually your internet freedom agenda, so thank you for taking the mantle. There's been a tremendous amount of turnover on the Senate Commerce Committee in my 7 years here at the FCC, so I'm delighted to see you come up to speed so very quickly and see these issues as so important as they are. And as you know, I think that international control of the internet is one of the greatest threats to.
Thank you for your work on that.
Thank you for your work on that. We have a mutual admiration.
Thank you.
But when I was in Dubai, it became very clear that your efforts and the efforts in the House to secure those unanimous bipartisan resolutions really did have an effect. There was a lot of talk among people all over the globe, and people do watch what we do. So I hope that you can take it to the next level. And I just wanted to ask whether you thought there were folks on both sides of the aisle in the Senate or maybe in the House who actually are taking this seriously and will take legislation to the next level, because we don't have much time.
Yeah, a couple things on that. First of all, Claire McCaskill has been fantastic as well, and I think we're going to be working with her, and we'll hopefully have something to announce on that soon about how to make that important. Let me tell you why this is important. It's still a relatively new issue to most people in the general population. Clearly, the people that are in this industry or people that care on a daily basis about internet freedom matters. But to the general population, it's not that it doesn't matter. It's just something people are not used to talking about. It's so brand new. I mean, if you look at how the world has transformed over the last 10, 15 years, it truly is the equivalent of the Industrial Revolution times 5. I mean, that's how displacing it's been, and also the doors that it's opened. So these are all very new issues. And I also think what happens to us, to those of us who live in this country, is the idea that somehow the government could control the internet is just, what do you mean? I mean, we live here. It's never happened to us. We don't realize that there are places where you can't just Google or Yahoo or search whatever you want. You can't. In fact, if you do, you're blocked. I don't know if people here fully realize that that's how it is. There are countries around the world where that's the way it's used, where the internet is manipulated in that way or controlled in that way. So we have to make clear to people that has happened all over the world, and that, you know, we need to make sure that people know clearly where we stand as the official policy of the U.S., and that is we do not want to see government regulation or control of the internet, not here, not abroad, and not anywhere. And I still think because of the amount of innovation and creativity that happens in this country with regards to technology, and in particular internet-based technology, we have an outsized influence on the world in terms of what the policy of the world is going to be on this issue. But this is an issue that has to be critical to our ability it's right up there with freedom of the press, in my mind. It's right up there with the First Amendment. It's right up there with all of these other constitutional rights that we have, and we need to clearly articulate that, not just here, but in every forum that we get the opportunity to do so.
Okay, this is going to be the last question, and it can't be a long one, no statements, and then this will be the last question right over here.
Mike Nelson with Bloomberg Government and with Georgetown University. Last week, the Internet Society had a great session on 6 heroes of the Internet. Bloggers sponsored by the State Department to come to the U.S. to talk about their efforts to ensure freedom of speech in Russia, China, elsewhere. The Russian blogger was incredibly eloquent and said, I'm being censored here in the U.S. I can't get to Russian websites, even Russian news sites, because of all the work that Hollywood does to block sites that might have a few copyrighted content problems. And his point was that these people are far more powerful than us.
Mike, you just have to, I think we got
So the question is, where do we draw, how do we tell the rest of the world that they can't censor the internet when we're taking all these efforts to...
Part of the situation where, part of the debate in all this is this competition between intellectual property rights and internet access rights. And that's why I said in my speech, if illegal activity is illegal activity. Just because you're doing it on the internet doesn't make it legal. You can't steal other people's ideas and put it on the internet, and because it's the internet, you're right to do it. But it is a delicate balancing act, and you saw that last year with SOPA and PIP and all those debates that emerged. That's one of the things we're going to have to work through, because this is such a brand new issue to us. How do you protect intellectual property? Because we want to protect intellectual property, right? I mean, if you come up with a great idea, you don't want someone else to, whether it's creative, whether it's music, whether it's something else, you don't want someone to come swooping in and take it from you, because what's the point of doing it? Whether it's in the arts or it's in technology, intellectual property has to be valued, and there is a property right, but it sometimes conflicts with the secondary, and that happens all the time where we have competing rights that crash into each other. And the answer is, it is so new that we don't know how we balance these two things. But there's a difference between protecting intellectual property and which is what he was running into, right?
55 blogs gets taken down because one person has one.
Well, that's the whole debate behind the SOPA, right? That you can target these sites because they have someone put a picture of Mickey Mouse up there without Disney's permission, and the whole site comes down. So that's a new issue. We've never faced that before. But what I'm trying to tell you that I think we can solve that. We can figure out a way to solve that. We got to work on it. I don't have a magic answer for it because it's brand new. No work's ever been done. This is uncharted territory. But there's a difference between that and a systematic effort to deny people access to information because of its content from a political perspective. In essence, we're not going to allow people to access Bloomberg. We're not going to allow people to access Reuters. We're not going to allow people to access ABC, CBS, NBC, because we don't like what they say about us, so we can't control what they're saying. And that's the more fundamental threat on the global scale. We also don't want people to impede people's ability to communicate with each other. Don't underestimate how revolutionary that is. People talk about the dynamism of American politics, you know, the Tea Party, this, that, and the other. Those movements exist for one simple reason. 15 years ago, in order to organize politically, you needed a massive central organization. You needed someone with phones and computers and printers and copiers so you could create flyers and hand it out to people. You needed massive infrastructure. Today, in order to be organized a political movement or any kind of movement, the only thing you need is access to a web page or Facebook or Twitter, and you can create a movement. You can connect with other people directly. And that has impacted and empowered the individual in ways that they've never been empowered. You look at citizen journalism today. Has it made government better today that we are now more accountable? Because any speech you give anywhere, people are taping it, and they'll put it up on YouTube within 30 seconds. And if you say something stupid or wrong or bad, the rest of the world will know about it. It's an inconvenience to policymakers. I bet you it makes them more careful in what they say. I bet you it makes people more accountable in how they behave. And so my point to you is that these are revolutions that have happened, and we want to encourage that. That's been good for the world. We don't want to restrict political speech, even if it's irresponsible political speech. You know, it's political speech. On the other hand, how do you protect intellectual property? How do you protect the creative work of an artist? You know, or a movie industry. We have to balance that, and it's a difficult balance. And the reason why last year I ended up backing away from SOPA and PIPA because I didn't think it struck the right balance. I think we have to do a lot of work on that. We do have to figure that out, but it has to be done in a way that's responsible and in a way that's fair and in a way that doesn't stifle creativity or the ability to communicate with each other or with the world. And, you know, I don't have a magic answer to it, but I'm certainly working on it. And as long as it doesn't mess up the NFL Sunday ticket, I think we'll be fine. Thank you guys so much. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Please thank Senator Rubio.